The current situation in Palestine really exposed a lot of people. We're starting to see certain figures that have been touted by people that I describe as the left-right alliance, exposing themselves as complete Zionists and vicious defenders of Israel who attack anyone who mildly criticizes Israel's genocidal assault against Gaza. And these individuals were just shortly before October 7th touted by these left-right alliance grifters as supposed allies with regard to the situation in Ukraine and possibly more broadly. So I think this whole situation has really destroyed this whole left-right alliance grift that we saw really come about, or come to a head, I guess you could say, with the Rage Against the War Machine publicity stunt that happened earlier. So today we have a guest, an excellent guest to discuss this, Glory Jones, who has also been exposing this whole situation with the left-right alliance grift, who has been active in her area in Florida, involved with the situation with Palestine organizing. Welcome. Please introduce yourself to the audience and tell people where they could find you and your work on social media.
Hi, I'm Glory Jones. I'm an independent artist and I research a bunch of stuff. And I also co-host the Slow News Day show, which you can find on Rockfin. And I also appear on many other shows like this one, and also our friend Franco over at Frank Analysis. But as to where you can find me on the ground and around, particularly between Miami-Dade and Broward County. But you can also find me on Twitter mainly. If you search Glory Jones, I'll come up with a hashtag Free Assange next to it. And that's me. I'm shadow banned to hell right now. But yeah, I'm still somewhat active on there. So yeah.
Yeah, so please, if you haven't already, go follow her on all of those on Twitter and wherever else you can find her work. So yeah, you've been active in your area in Florida and Palestine activism. I've also been, for years, I've been active, but this time around, I think things are quite different with the situation with organizing. How have things been in your area in Florida?
So obviously we haven't had like those big hallmark marches like you've seen in places like London or New York or Los Angeles or DC, but we've actually been very active down here, which for a place like particularly Miami, but Florida in general, is pretty significant, just because even though there is always stuff happening here, South Florida isn't necessarily the most active community, particularly because of the state repression that's just rampant, as well as the fact that it's infested with many bootlickers per se. And we're also facing an influx of bootlickers. And there's also just the fact as well that it's South Florida. It's a huge tourist hub, tech hub, and now they're trying to make it into an innovation hub. So it's not really a place exactly which would inspire a lot of activism. So that's, I lay that out just because that's why it's particularly significant that we are very active here down in South Florida. Al Auda, which is the Right to Return Coalition, and the chapter is very active here in South Florida, as well as Jewish Voices for Peace. They've become very active down here, and I'm glad to work with both of them. And they're, again, wonderful people, so I have to vouch for them there. But yeah, they've been very active, and so is Students in Palestine, which is also facing state repression, given that Ron DeSantis is trying to dismantle SJP on college campuses, and they're fighting back against that right now. but they've all been very active. There's been actions on universities, for instance, like at the University of Miami, they had a teach-in a couple of weeks ago. They have also had campus protests at FAU, I believe, and a couple of other universities. We have also had major protests in downtown Fort Lauderdale outside the federal courthouse. We had one just this past weekend right on Ocean Drive Beach, where we were able to shut down traffic for a couple hours and actually get a support from a lot of people. We also held right along Biscayne Boulevard, which is, big traffic area. It's where the Miami Heat play. It's where they have this Torch of Friendship memorial, which celebrates the friendship that the United States had with all of its puppets in Latin America. And of course, there's a space missing there for Cuba. But yeah, right outside that monument, we had a 48-hour long protest, 48 hours symbolizing the Nakba, which happened in 1948. And throughout that whole thing, we had so much support coming in from just from people honking their horn to people coming by and saying, "Oh, I saw you guys here and I agree with you." And we found that, the normal person in Miami, and especially the average working class person down here in South Florida, really supports Palestine, even if they aren't necessarily as active as some of the people who are organizing more frequently down here. And the pro-Palestinian community here is just growing and growing. It's really been growing in the past couple years, but again, since October 7th and the subsequent genocidal push by the Zionist nation, it's really exploded from there. So we have, and we also have an upcoming protest in West Palm on Sunday. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff happening and it won't stop.
Wow, that's very active. And as you said, especially considering the overall atmosphere and situation in Florida, it's really great that there's such strong activity and consistent activity going on. Here in New York City, there's been just about every day there's some action or another, not necessarily massive rallies. Usually there's like a large rally like maybe once a week or so, but every day there's like smaller actions all over Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx. So things have been very active here, and I think that's throughout most of the country, at least in the big cities. There's things that really have heated up to an extent that we haven't seen as far as in Palestine organizing. I don't think it's ever been this active. And it's interesting you mentioned, in Florida with DeSantis, with this far right administration, they're cracking down on pro-Palestine organizing. In New York City, where it's the Democrats and it's supposedly like so liberal and progressive, the elected officials are cracking down. The mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, has come out and condemned Palestine protesters. He's done everything possible to virtue signal about how much he supports Israel and Zionism. The university administration of various universities in New York City has taken action to in various forms and to varying extents to prevent and really repress student organizing. But nonetheless, students are organizing very actively on campuses despite that, and people are just pushing ahead. And as you mentioned, as is the case in Florida, I think loads of people in New York City as well, and I think across the country, who maybe never went to Palestine protests before, maybe haven't gone in years to Palestine protests, are coming out now because the situation is just so horrendous of what Israel is doing and how the U.S. is just greenlighting it.
Yeah, I've actually met people who've never been to a protest for anything before. And it's like, they'll come to you and they'll be like, "Oh, this is my first protest." And then you'll say, "Oh, really? Like thing?" And then they say, "Oh, yeah, it's my first protest ever." And it's like, that just goes to show obviously what what a grave situation it is over an occupied Palestine, but also the fact that, you know, people are really waking up and starting to stand up to some of this colonial madness that's in the world.
Yeah, and that's great when new people who have never gone to protests before are coming out now, and that's what needs to happen. I think that very much scares the various imperialist politicians and these various Zionist outlets on social media that do everything they can to try and dox people for criticizing Israel. I think they're going to such an extreme to dox people and try and get people fired is because they're terrified and they want to try and do anything they can to try and scare people away, because more and more people are coming out, and people who aren't really that involved, not involved at all in organizing, are now coming out again because the situation is so bad. But besides that, as far as the sort of organized organizers and commentators, there's been a controversy over this year over the Rage Against the War Machine rally, which happened back in February. And I've been critical of that, that sort of alignment that came about. You've also been critical of that. And I think a lot of actually principled anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist organizers have pointed out some of the issues with that. And I think our criticisms of it before October 7th and everything that's happened since then were extremely strong to begin with, but now it's beyond, it's way beyond.
It's been vindicated. Actually.
Exactly. We've been completely vindicated. So in particular, two of these individuals that these supposed leftists and anti-imperialists involved with the Rage Against the War Machine were trying to promote and whitewash and say, oh, we should work with them. We need to work with them. We need to work with everyone we can to stop World War III and the threat of thermonuclear war. That's their favorite thing to say, is that nothing matters except for thermonuclear war. So that means that we'll work with Zionists, work with all kinds of horrendous people because of the threat of thermonuclear war, because of the situation in Ukraine. And these two particular individuals that have come out and are just absolutely vicious in their their attacks on people, Tulsi Gabbard and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the funny thing is, shortly before October 7th, some of these right-left alliance grifters who were condemning anyone who had issues with the Rage Against the War Machine, just shortly before October 7th, they were praising and defending and promoting Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tulsi Gabbard. And most of them are pretty silent now. They don't have much to say. I'm curious, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah. Well, and especially like with Marjorie Taylor Greene, because I forget if she was actually a speaker at the rally, but I do know she was heavily promoted by a lot of the speakers there. When she had attended an anti-Russia Ukraine war demonstration that Code Pink was holding, you know, the organizers, after pictures of her with the Code Pink protesters started circulating on social media, you know, some code organizers basically came out and said, hey, listen, you know, we let her stand with us, but we're pretty sure she did this in an opportunistic fashion, which is true. Like, I don't know why pointing that out is exactly a taboo thing, because it's very clear that the anti-intervention position that Marjorie Taylor Greene took on Russia and Ukraine was something motivated mainly by opportunism, and also by the fact that she wanted to take those resources and then spend it on the bigger war with China, or at the southern border, securitizing and militarizing the shit out of the southern border to, you know, prevent fentanyl from crossing the border, or prevent terrorist savages from crossing the border, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty clear. I'd hope it would be pretty clear that that's where motivations for standing against the Ukraine the Russia-Ukraine war lied. And, you know, like her putting forth a bill to block funding for Ukraine isn't an inherently bad thing. But again, this is a congressperson. They're not actually there to serve the people. They're there to be PR for corporations and empire, which actually pull the strings in this country. So you have to be honest and recognize that she's not doing it out of, you know, the right intentions. And then, yeah, so that's my thing on Marjorie Taylor Greene. And obviously it's being true by the fact that she's just a virulent Zionist right now, and, you know, promoting among with other, you know, a lot of other anti-establishment commentators and politicians promoting this idea that there's like Hamas terror cells in Mexico that can't wait to cross the southern border, or that there's jihadists right now in the United States that can't wait for Palestine to win, that can't wait for Hamas, or sorry, as they say it, Hamas, to win the war. So that way they can complete their jihad or whatever it is. And it's just the most, you know, stupid, repulsive nonsense ever that they're pushing against immigrants, especially Muslim and Arab immigrants. But yeah, I digress. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is promoting right now. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard, who I have a history with because I used to volunteer for her campaign. And
oh wow, you were part of her campaign.
Yeah, I used to volunteer
for
her campaign. Yeah, in 2019, when she was actually LARPing as, like, you know, someone who is anti-war, pro-environment, and it, oh my God, and it was back in 2019. Freaking puppy dog-eyed activist who still thought that, you know, we could vote our way out of it. Not that we could vote our way out of it, but that some politicians would help us, and then all that nonsense. And
well, at that time, Bernie Sanders was big, and she was sort of attaching herself to Bernie Sanders in the early stages of that. So I think, yeah, me too. And I think a lot of people, even if we didn't like Bernie and we knew he was an imperialist and a Zionist and stuff, there was the thought, okay, maybe his movement, something good could come out of it. But yeah, please continue.
No, and that's what I thought with Tulsi too, because she had, while she was in Congress, she had introduced the Off Fossil Fuels Act and the Terrorist Act. And I looked at those and I was like, okay, so she's kind of, you know, backing up some of her talk here. I think I can support her. So, you know, I volunteered for her and all that good stuff. And then she dropped out and I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm done with the fucking presidential election. And then, you know, she more and more, she started making this like, very right-wing, hyper-partisan grift turn, and now she's just outright sounding like George Bush, and it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm so glad I don't support you anymore. But yeah, because she's really, again, she's promoting that and again that she said the past couple years really about the number one threat to all of humanity on earth being Islamism and the violent Islamist ideology. And essentially like, oh, you can't support Palestine because part of the resistance has Islamist terrorists. I joined the army to fight after 9/11, even though like she clearly knows, again, that there was a lot of foul play on the part of the United States with regards to 9/11. And she clearly knows that the United States military, along with the CIA, along with various corporations around the world, really, they sponsor actual terrorism that happens in the global South. And she knows all of this, and she's connected to people that know all of this. And yet she's going out and spouting this nonsense about stopping Hamas and yada, yada, yada. And like, I don't even want to call it disappointing just because I've completely given up on her years ago, but it's just incredibly, I don't know, it's annoying. It's annoying to see. And it really is disheartening in a sense to see just how many people are still willing to buy into that nonsense regarding jihadism in the United States and in the EU, just because it really promotes a repulsive and disgusting narrative against immigrants, refugees, and anybody who's not white. And it also is very clearly being used to push a lot of ulterior agendas that aim to securitize and militarize society and usher in, a lot of digital surveillance measures such as digital IDs, which can easily be connected to an outlet like Palantir, for instance, which is again backed by two Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, two virulent Zionists again. So that's just an example of the way that it's being used, and it's very frustrating to see this being by a lot of figures that are hailed as sort of anti-establishment.
Yeah, and I find it astounding that so many. Well, it's not even that it's so many, but it's very prominent YouTubers like Jimmy Dore, for example,
Oh,
that
yeah.
fall for this. It's like Jimmy Dore's been doing this for how long? And Tulsi Gabbard, even at the time of the Rage Against the War Machine, even before, as I said, even before October 7th and her most recent Zionist comments, she made clear that she was a Zionist. She was an active duty military personnel person
In the
in
PSYOPs
Africa,
division.
in the PSYOPs division, which is exactly what she is if you think about it. She's basically a PSYOP, her whole political stances. And she put out, like, I don't know if it was a TikTok video or some stupid video on social media talking about how she's so proud of her service in Africa. She doesn't say where specifically because she has to protect the security, blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah, I know which video you're talking about too, because she literally opened it being like, "Sorry, I haven't posted in a while, guys. I was overseas in Africa fighting terrorists,"
Protecting
and it's
your
like, whoa,
freedom.
wait, what? You were just casually dropping that you're doing an imperialism while you were on your little Twitter hiatus. Like, okay, thanks.
Aloha, everyone. You haven't heard much from me lately. I've been gone for the last 4 months, serving on an active duty tour and deployment to Africa as a civil affairs officer. I was supporting a special forces mission to go after Al-Qaeda affiliated jihadists. Now, every single day, it was truly my honor to work with incredible patriots. It is our men and women in uniform who selflessly and quietly defend the safety, security, and freedom of our country every day.
Yeah. And the response of so many of these people who are duped by this left-right alliance BS, their response, it's amazing. No exaggeration. Well, maybe slight exaggeration, but so many of them, I've seen them. When you bring this up, they're like, what? Oh, I mean, it's Africa. Who cares? It's Al-Qaeda. Come on. Who cares? It's like that's
Okay,
been their
but like
response.
Al-Shabaab is actually a problem in Somalia, and people love us for helping fight it.
Yeah, these are the same people who are who are rightly 1 minute pointing out how the U.S. supported Al-Qaeda, the next minute, and pointing out how U.S. foreign policy is always based on lies. It's always imperialist, and they use these various talking points for propaganda to justify imperialism. All of a sudden, it's like, oh no, the U.S. is really fighting Al-Qaeda there, and it's really a just cause. It's like, how stupid are these people? Just because Tulsi Gabbard says it, they just eat the whole thing up and believe the whole thing. So even before this whole thing, we knew. Even at the time of the Rage Against the War Machine, we knew that Tulsi Gabbard was a fraud and an imperialist and a Zionist. But now she's talking about how the Democratic Party is beholden to jihadists. She's basically implying that Joe Biden is a jihadist and a Hamas supporter. In absolute, like, complete insanity. And I don't understand how these people, who otherwise they claim to oppose what Israel's doing, they claim to be against Zionism. Somehow they fell for this, and I don't know if they've started to criticize Tulsi Gabbard, but it's amazing. There needs to be some kind of reckoning for this kind
Yeah.
of mistake.
I
And
think for what it's worth, amongst like the Tulsi supporters, obviously I don't talk with Tulsi supporters anymore, but from what I've seen, there's a decent chunk of Tulsi supporters who supported her back in 2019 because of what, what we thought she stood for. A decent chunk of those supporters are now calling her out, being like, "Hey, yo, what the fuck are you saying? You know better. This makes no sense." But yeah, there's still a decent chunk of people who buy the shit.
yeah, well, that's good that actual like regular people, let's say, that were involved in the campaign are calling her out on that, because I mean it's so obvious that it's beyond, it's really beyond. Before it was pretty obvious. Now it's just beyond anything. But I think honestly, a lot of these, as I mentioned, YouTubers and people who make a living off of this and who really used Rage Against the War Machine as a publicity stunt for them to get more money in reality, they kind of know what's going on and they don't really care. I mean, some of them maybe are stupid, but a lot of them, I mean, they would have to be extremely stupid to not see what's going on. I think it's just they realize that it's a good grift for them.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's why very few of the, YouTube influencer ecosystem that's connected to Rage Against the War Machine was willing to call out Jimmy Dore for the dog shit interview he had with RFK,
oh,
where
that's
he
another one.
sat
Yeah.
there. Yeah, where he sat there and let RFK spew the most vile Zionist propaganda unchallenged, and then afterwards tried to weasel his way out of it by saying, "Oh, well, I showed him one graphic from the UN and I got him to agree to a debate with Max Blumenthal," when it's like, bro, you seriously thought that he was actually going to debate Max Blumenthal? No, what's happening is you're doing fucking damage control and your simps love you to call you out on it. So, yeah, that's another thing I wanted to bring up because that was another ass showing moment there.
Yeah, that's another good point. I think it brings me to this other point that I wanted to raise. These are the same people who are they're relentless when it comes to criticizing AOC and the squad, and rightly so. I mean, the squad does need to be called out for all their support for warmongering, but there's a complete double standard. It's like when it comes to the squad, AOC, it's like they're complete pure evil. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's deliberate. But then with Tulsi Gabbard or RFK, oh, he doesn't know. Let's just set up this debate and we'll sort it all out. It's not deliberate. He's well intentioned. This is, we're just going to explain it to him and he'll understand. No, this is a deliberate thing, and it's he's a politician, and it's not an issue of oh, let's just convince him. There's a reason why he takes these positions. So, and I think so that brings me to another point I wanted to make. So with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who a lot of these people have been whitewashing, these Rage Against the War Machine people have been whitewashing and supporting and promoting, she is even worse than the squad when it comes to the current situation in Palestine. Now, the squad is not good, honestly. They are
Yeah.
not sufficient at all, but they're making very mild criticisms of Israel. And according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's calling the squad Hamas supporters, terrorism supporters, anti-Semitic. So are all of these Rage Against the War Machine people going to now call for an alliance with the squad because the squad is like slightly better on the issue of Palestine? I don't think they are. I wouldn't. I'm not advocating for them to do that, but according to
Yeah.
their logic, they would be calling for an alliance with the squad right now when it comes to the issue of Palestine, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone where I wouldn't want an alliance with any politician unless if it's solely using them as a means. And yes, I know that does take away some of their autonomy. But let's be real, if you're going into the United States Congress, you're already giving that up to begin with. So yeah, I'm not someone to advocate for an alliance with any politician to begin with, or any member of corporate media, like say Tucker Carlson or Piers Morgan, for instance.
Oh yeah.
For with those kinds of figures, they're more so they're more so platforms than anything else, and a means to help further your cause. So I just don't understand why. I mean, I do understand, but rhetorically, it's a question I raise, that people who claim to be anti-establishment, they don't just unilaterally sort of ignore. I don't want to say ignore, but have full knowledge and be cognizant of what the actual intentions of politicians are. That, like, if the squad does something supportive of their cause, it's, oh, they're leeches, they're grifters, they're just doing this for PR, which is, again, 100% right. But when Marjorie Taylor Greene does the same thing, it's, oh, how dare you call her an opportunist? Are you trying to sabotage our alliance that's going to stop war? And it's
you must want thermonuclear war, World War III, if
I
you
know,
criticize
and it's
her.
like, listen, like, I'm not a big fan of the idea of nuclear war either, but it's essentially, the threat of it is essentially getting watered down a lot, to the point where it's becoming less of, a significant threat should great powers clash, and more so of just emotional blackmail to use against people to, abandon their principles. Like, oh, you don't want to ally, you don't want to kiss this Zionist ass, well, I guess you must want nuclear war.
You know
Or
what it
it's
is?
like,
It's exactly what the Democrats do, isn't it? It's like when the election time comes, it's like, what, you're not going to
yeah,
vote for the Democrat? You must want there to be fascism. You don't care if fascism is going to be, it's the exact same logic.
yeah. And it's like, yes, I do. Again, I'm not even saying that you can't work with people. I'm just saying you need to call them out and be cognizant of what they are, and be aware of the fact that they have ulterior motives and an agenda of their own. And unless if you actively call that, or, work to change their mind, then you're not gonna advance your cause in a really substantive way. All that's gonna really happen is, you might get some more eyes on it, but then for what? You're gonna get people that still think that it's okay to call every brown person a jihadist, and now push for giving more weapons to Israel, the Zionist occupation. Sorry, like, I'm sorry, but you have to be willing to actually confront people, and if you're going to change them, then you have to at least make it socially and financially untenable to maintain their Zionism, because otherwise, this shit's just going to continue, because it's 2023, and I'm glad to see that Zionism is finally starting to crumble, but to go faster. This shit can't go on. It really, I'm really sick and tired, and I'm sure there are way more other people in this world that are even more sick and tired of the continued oppression and genocide of Palestinian people than I am, which is so intimately connected to colonization and terrible subjugation that's happening around the world.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I think it's a question of, okay, if you're going to have a pragmatic alliance with someone, the question is, are you using them or are they using you? And I think with the Rage Against the War Machine thing, these supposed leftists involved with it were basically used by the people on the right. And if you just uncritically support these people, you're basically just a rubber stamp. All you are is basically, oh, look, I'm a leftist, but I'm not like those other leftists. I'm a leftist, and it's basically like, so when Fox News has some leftist on to, say, criticize the Democrats, and I'm not saying not to go on Fox News, it's a great platform, but the reason why they're doing that is because they want to give credence to their own argument. It's like, look, even these leftists are against what they're saying. They're using you to justify their own message. They're not bringing you on just because they're trying to have a balanced opinion, or they're trying to bring on all sorts of different voices. They're using you basically to prop themselves up to say, oh, look, even this leftist agrees with me. And I think if you are to have an alliance with some politician, I think a key thing to this would be you have to extract concessions out of them. And that's not what they did during the Rage Against the War Machine. They just
kissed their ass. That's like even like even worse than not getting any concessions. It was like a massive ass kissing fest, being like, oh my God, I disagree with you, but I'm so happy that you're here with us today. That is so good of you to come together with us to oppose the war. You are on the right side of history, and I love you for it. And then, 8 months later, they're screaming on about everybody that says from the river to the sea is a jihadist that wants to genocide all Jewish people.
Yeah, that's exactly. And for more, on Marjorie Taylor Greene, what did she do? She called for Rashida Tlaib to be censured by the House of Representatives, and that's what happened. The House of Representatives censured Rashida Tlaib. So I think when we're in a situation right now where Marjorie Taylor Greene, who these supposed anti-imperialists involved with Rage Against the War Machine were whitewashing and saying was so great and promoting, while at the same time condemning the Squad and saying they're pure evil. And again, the Squad are bad and they're pro-imperialists and everything. But when you're in a situation now where everything you said is the opposite, in the sense of that now, on this instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the most extreme Zionist and the Squad is like mildly critical of Israel, that's like, that completely destroys your argument. And unless you come out and say, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene on this issue is completely at odds with us and the Squad is actually a little bit closer to us on this. So my previous idea of trying to align with Marjorie Taylor Greene was incorrect. Unless you come out and do that, it's like it's delusional. It's completely delusional.
Yeah.
Oh, and for more with Marjorie Taylor Greene, there were protests at the Capitol against Israel's onslaught against Gaza, and she tried to say that, oh, this is an insurrection. This is an insurrection.
Oh my God. It's like the irony, and like, I'll come on the record here and say, like, I don't think that January 6th was a full-on insurrection. Like that, like come on, insurrections go way harder than that, first of all. Second of all, it's like the irony to be a supposed advocate for the January 6th protesters and then turn around and go to a peaceful sit-in and then call that an insurrection. And also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that area where they held that sit-in was the part of the Capitol building that was publicly open, open to members of the public. So like, and again, I'm not trying to say that either one was more of an insurrection than the other, because neither of them were. But again, it's so blatantly critical. And then at that same event, she was going around tweeting out like a picture of a screenshot of someone's group chat they had that was named Global Intifada. And she was saying that that's like smoking gun evidence that everyone there is a jihadi and everybody plotting against the good white people of the West to take over their populations and whatever. And it's like, bro, like, I don't think you want to see some of the names of like some of the Discord servers I'm in if you're getting offended by Global Intifada.
Yeah. It's and what it was is her attempt to try and criminalize. I mean, it was a pathetic failure because it was so ridiculous. But what that was is a clear attempt to try and criminalize peaceful protest in support of Palestine. And I'm pretty sure the groups that called for that were like, I wouldn't even necessarily call them anti-Zionist per se. Maybe there were some, but a lot of those groups were groups that believe in like two-state solution. They're not like,
I can't speak for all of the groups there, but I can but I can speak for at least Jewish Voice for Peace, saying that I know they're explicitly anti-Zionist. But like again, like the other groups, like If Not Now, or some of the other Jewish centered groups that have been calling for a ceasefire lately, I'm not sure if they're pro two-state or not, which I'm not, because two-state solution is kind of moronic. But
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's debunked at this point. It's completely. There's no way anyone could try and really make that argument at this point. But even so, regardless, it's a clear attempt on her part to try and criminalize the pro-Palestine demonstrations, just completely peaceful pro-Palestine demonstrations. And it really says a lot that supposed anti-imperialists, who had this whole holier-than-thou attitude for people that were critical of allying with these sorts of people, supported these people who, 1 minute ago they were supporting them because they were these great anti-interventionists when it comes to Ukraine, supposedly, and now they're just the most extreme Zionists. But
yeah. Well, and another point I want to make too is, with a lot of these figures, we knew that they were Zionists before Al-Aqsa flood ever happened. So
that's
even,
right.
obviously now it's different just because like they're just being out in your face with their Zionism. But I mean, we always knew that a lot of these figures were Zionists, with people, like Tulsi Gabbard with her, weird crusade against Islamism, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, being super pro-Israel, as well as extremely pro-national border security, that kind of nonsense. And then like Tucker Carlson as well, huge Zionist, fucking CIA daddy, former Contra, too, spent time in Nicaragua too, all of that. Douglas McGregor, another Zionist. Even Scott Ritter collaborated with the Zionist occupation during his time as a UN weapons inspector. And it's like so many other figures. We already knew that these people were Zionists, and we were sitting back telling so much people like, hey, yo, listen, these motherfuckers are opportunists. They're Zionists as hell. Like, please listen, because they're not actually in this for the right reason. They're just a different of intervention, so, or a different shade of war or whatever. So, oh my God. So it's just so frustrating to see that now they're even more open and just 10 times more repulsive with their commentary on what's happening in occupied Palestine, right? And all you can do is just be like, fucking told you, numbnuts. Like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, they're just spewing the most hateful, disgusting rhetoric. And it's like,
yeah, the most
I don't know what else to say, because
Zionist.
I don't know what else to say, because we knew it was, and we told motherfuckers it was coming. And it's like, now that it's here, it's like, okay, well, not enough people bothered to stand against this shit. So now we got to deal with it now, when it's heightened even more and with even more institutional backing. So at least the masses are standing against it. That's the thing that gives me hope of the day, is that the masses are standing against it, and the masses aren't taking any of that fucking just absolutely hateful rhetoric that a bunch of these right-wing grifters are spewing. So at the end of the day, it's going to sound grim, but at the end of the day, when boomers and Gen Xers die off, it's going to be, Zoomers are going to be a bit better on resisting Zionism, resisting Zionism at least.
Yeah. And you mentioned Douglas McGregor. He's the guy who said, he's on record saying that the U.S. didn't target civilians in Vietnam. And he's got on the record saying that the U.S. is controlled by Marxists. It's sort of similar to how these
don't
Tulsi
threaten
Gabbard...
me with a good time, Douglas. Like,
yeah, it's like with the Tulsi Gabbard saying, "Oh, the Democratic Party is beholden to jihadists." It's like, okay, yeah, you're definitely completely sane and not delusional at all. But I think the positive thing is that, as we were talking about earlier with the protests and stuff going on, these lots of new people are getting into this, and they don't buy into this nonsense. Most people who are pro-Palestine don't fall for this nonsense. I think it's it's really just a few grifters who have a big following online, but when it comes to real people, like the Rage Against the War Machine rally, despite their millions of subscribers, if you add them all together, hardly anyone showed up. Minuscule rally compared to other, rallies that go on, anti-war rallies that go on in Washington, D.C. And probably, honestly, a lot of those subscribers are bots, to be honest, because we saw, and it didn't, they promoted that heavily. It was even promoted by mainstream media. Fox News, Tucker Carlson gave a shout out to it shortly before it happened, telling people to go to it. And despite all of that promotion for such a long period of time, even by mainstream media, Fox News, that's all they could bring together. So I think it's not really as widespread as it might seem online. And I think that's the positive thing. And I think now more and more people are getting involved who don't really have time for this sort of BS.
Yeah, it's actually really refreshing that I haven't met a single person on the ground who's like, "Oh, do you watch Jimmy Dore?"
Yeah.
Or sharing like an interview clip from like a Douglas McGregor or something like that. It's actually like it's really it's really refreshing. I will say though, we have had to, at least in South Florida, oh my god, I can't talk. We have had to put it out there that Jackson Hinkle is probably a Fed, and also, besides potentially being a Fed, he's also just a blatant grifter in using Palestinian trauma to enrich himself. And also, that motherfucker literally lives in a luxury high-rise in Miami, and I haven't seen him at one pro-Palestine action, despite the fact that they've been happening weekly, and we've been having 2-3 events a week lately. So yeah, that motherfucker is a grifting opportunist, and luckily enough, more catching on to it, especially because you have a lot of crossover between the Black Lives Matter movement and the pro-Palestine movement. And the Black Lives Matter movement are familiar with the likes of Shaun King. So obviously, when they see other figures like him, like Hinkle, they go on warn people in the movement about that. And that's been happening, luckily. And again, Jackson Hinkle is another individual who's just been receiving so much algorithmic support, given how far up Elon Musk's ass he is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's clear that people are, and it's so despicable when people try to grift off of this, give me $3, subscribe to my, or not even subscribe, pay, and where's that money going? I could see like outlets that like do journalism on the ground ask for money because you need money. But when you're just like reposting stuff from other people on Twitter and asking for money, it's really just,
I know where it's going. It's going to pay rent in the fucking luxury high rise that he lives in Miami.
Yeah.
Because if you live in a high rise in Miami, I apologize, but like it's a scientific fact that 98% of people living in luxury high rises in Miami, especially downtown Miami, are complete scumbags. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that this situation has really exposed a lot of people, and it's another figure, sort of different from this sort of left-right alliance grift that we've been talking about, but another figure who we knew was bad before, but he just really hit a new low, is Bernie Sanders. He came out on record. Yeah, I know, right? He came out on record saying that he's against a ceasefire, not even calling for an international investigation, not even calling for the Israelis, the Netanyahu and the military and the whole Israeli state, all these people and these politicians calling for genocide, not even calling for them to face justice. not even calling for, the land to be returned to the Palestinians, just a ceasefire, and he is against that. I mean, it's just, we knew he was a Zionist, we knew he was an imperialist, but this is just a new low for him. I just had to mention that because that's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, like he was always not good. Um, but in the past couple years, he's just been fully cucked, really. And this is definitely a new for him. And especially him not being able to stand up for Rashida Tlaib or like the squad, who are again making the most milquetoast proposals ever with regards to the ceasefire. But it's like you can't even stand up for that. You're just pathetic at this point.
Yeah, even that's too much. It's really insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really hope that people learn from this situation and don't fall for these grifting politicians anymore, because we've seen this so many times, and it seems like some people just don't learn. Then again, there's also the fact that a lot of them probably do know, but it's a good financial grift for them to get behind these people. So, but I really think that this time around, it's really exposed these people, and hopefully it's going to be more difficult for these sort of corrupt politicians to pull this stuff in the future, because we've seen this. Obama was the famous example of the politician who said one thing to get elected, then he did the opposite. Is an imperialist warmonger, just like all the other presidents, and we've seen so many other examples of this. But I think this would be a good place to end it. Do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, I know I mentioned it briefly earlier, but again, if it's 2023 and obviously there's still a lot of really hateful and destructive ideologies about, and Zionism is one of them, and it's currently, we're currently seeing it sort of fulfill and try to manifest one of its main goals regarding the genocide of Palestinians. So I think, in order to really get rid of that once and for all, I think there's going to be, beyond removing institutional support for the Zionist occupation, there is going to have to be some work to us with regards to making it financially untenable to be a Zionist and to openly cheerlead for this genocidal Zionist occupation. And BDS is a part of that. And I know it's unrealistic to ask everyone to boycott every company. That's why, for instance, BDS only calls for the boycott of certain companies that are making large contributions to the Zionist project, like Starbucks or McDonald's, etc. But, with regards to us, I think it's a pretty easy move to not give money to any of these Zionist politicians or Zionist commentators in alt or independent media. I think that's a very easy change that we can, to at least help the grassroots efforts in finally eradicating Zionism. And again, I think we need to we can do our part at least towards independent media and political grifters to make it financially untenable to support the Zionist occupation. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Great point. And thank you so much for joining, Glory. I think this was an excellent discussion, and thank you all for tuning in. And please remind the audience again where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, search up Glory Jones, and I come up with a hashtag Assange next to it. Again, I'm hella shadow banned, but I still tweet on there. So yeah, that's the main way where you can find me. Other than that, you can also find me on other shows like Slow News Day, which is a program on Rockfin, and other shows like this one, and Frank Analysis.